Halona is present.
Honorable Pernell Halona is on the line. Honorable Carl R. Slater.
Present.
Honorable Carl Slater is on the line. Honorable Charlene So.
I'm present.
Honorable Charlene So is on the line. Honorable Daniel E. So. Honorable Edison Winika.
Here.
Honorable Edison Winika is on the line. Vice Chair, you have 4 members entering roll call this morning.
Thank you very much, Ms. Springer. Delegate Halona, could you provide an invocation for us this morning? Delegate Halona, are you in a position to provide invocation or?
Oh, okay. I didn't miss that. I can do that, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and I appreciate that. And good morning to all test committee members online, all the people online, and thanks for joining us. And I hope everybody has a good day today. And so we'll all bow our heads and pray to the Lord here today. Lord, we thank you, Lord Jesus, for this wonderful day. We thank you for all this moisture that you're bringing to us today, in hopes that we collect a lot of snowfall for our water runoffs. We ask, Lord, that you help us today to make these right decisions to move forward here. We ask that you be with all of our members, Lord Jesus, that when we make our trip to north, if we're on the way up there, that we protect us, Lord, and watch over us and make our trip safe, that we may take care of business there in Salt Lake City. Also, want to express my sorrow for all the people that we lost in the COVID. Lord, we ask that you protect them and the ones that are sick and those that have lost their loved ones, comfort their hearts, Lord Jesus Christ, not only here on the Navajo Nation, but across the United States and around the world. We ask, Lord, that you protect us and give us guidance as we move forward through the day and the week and this month, and that we are able to help our people continue to move forward with our people. We ask, Lord, that you bless our veterans out there today, that we thank them for their services and the freedom that we enjoy today, and bless them, Lord, to keep them safe and keep everybody safe and moving forward here today. Lord, we also ask that you bless our leaders, President Mayers and Vice President Elijah. We still have a lot of things that we need to continue to pass through the legislation here for our ARPA funding. We want to make sure that, Lord, that you give us the guidance to get this money out there to spend so we can keep the people moving forward and living in a better life, and also to keep them safe from the virus. Lord, we ask all these blessings for you, and that our leaders, especially President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, all the difficulties that are going on in the world today, around the world, give them the strength and wisdom to move forward and make the right decisions for the people of this nation. We ask all these blessings for you in the name of Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Vice President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Halona. Committee members, do you have any announcements? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 2, recognize guests and visiting officials. Thank you very much to the individuals we have on the line. We appreciate you participating in the work session or listening in today. Number 3, review agenda. This is a work session, so we don't take really formal steps in terms of passing action items or things like that. But I will ask Ms. Benali to please read the proposed agenda.
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the Health, Education, and Human Services Committee. You have your proposed agenda. Health, Education, and Human Services Committee 24th Nomination Council Work Session, February 22nd, 2022. Presiding the Honorable Carl R. Slater, Vice Chairperson. Place is via telecommunications, Window Rock, Navajo Nation, Arizona. 1, call session, work session to order. Roll call, invocation, announcements. 2, recognize guests and visiting officials. 3, review and adopt review the agenda. 4, work session reports. A is the current status of the San Juan County lawsuits and settlements. B is the San Juan County schools regarding safety of Navajo students utilizing face covering / masks in the public education system. This concern was reported by the San Juan County, Utah Commissioner Kenneth Maryboy. And the presenters are going to be Navajo Nation Human Rights Commission, presenter Leonard Gorman, Executive Director, Navajo Department of Justice, presenter Doreen McPaul, Navajo Nation Attorney General, and Paul Spruan, Assistant Attorney General with the Navajo Nation Department of Justice Litigation Unit. The next steps would be the issues and concerns and also next steps. 5, close of work session, announcements, and adjournment. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Benali. Committee members, do you have any additions or deletions or anything else you'd like to change on the agenda? Okay, sounds like it's good. We'll move on to item 4, work session reports. A, current status of San Juan County lawsuits and settlements. And I know that Chair So was more influential in developing and directing this agenda. So I'm not sure I can provide much more background on what he meant by that, but I'm guessing it's all the San Juan County lawsuits and settlements that the Human Rights Commission has been involved in. So, Ms. Benali, was he intending the Human Rights Commission to provide this update for A, or was it DOJ or a combination therein?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair, it's a combination of both offices. The Human Rights Commission, I'm sure Mr. Leonard Gorman will go into it, what issues that his office has investigated and has been involved in as far as the San Juan County lawsuits and settlements in Utah. And also that I think the Department of Justice also followed through on a few of the lawsuits and settlements. Mr. Vice Chair.
Well, at this time, Mr. Gorman, I'd like to recognize you to present.
Good morning.
You can recognize any agents you would like to.
Good morning, members of the Health, Education, Human Services Committee. And I have 2 staff with me that are listening in on the conversation. One is Sandy Wilson, she's our investigator, and then Bobby Baldwin, she's our policy analyst. Just as an overview of where things are at with our office regarding the San Juan County, Utah. Just want to cover maybe 2 or 3 things. One is that we do have an ongoing settlement agreement with the San Juan County, Utah. This settlement agreement was scheduled to expire last year or 2 years ago. I think it was at the end of 2020, December 31st, 2020. And it was extended to the end of December 2024. There are several components of that settlement agreement. One is that the San Juan County Clerk's Office would provide effective language assistance under Section 203 of the Voting Rights Act. And that there will be components of allowing Navajo citizens to become language assistance providers. So we have a provision in the settlement agreement that provides San Juan County Clerk's Office to engage trained individuals that would provide the interpretation services to Navajo citizens that need language assistance under 203. Now, the Voting Rights Act, the national law across the country, identifies counties across the United States or entities across the United States that are considered to be covered jurisdictions. And all of the counties that extend onto the Navajo Nation are Section 203 counties. So as an example, on the Arizona side, Coconino, Navajo, Apache counties. And then on the New Mexico side, there's about 7 counties that are Section 203 covered jurisdictions, including but not limited to San Juan, McKinley, Bernalillo, Sandoval, Rio Arriba, Cibola, Socorro. Those are some of the counties that are a part of the Section 203 covered jurisdictions. In the Utah side, it's San Juan County, Utah. They provide language assistance to Navajo and Ute voters in the county. So that's a part of our settlement agreement. And the second part is to provide polling places on the Navajo Nation. Part of the purpose of this settlement is that back in 2014, the county decided to close all polling places except one place in the county. And that was supposed to have been the Monticello Clerk's Office. So our office began the process of pursuing the reopening of the polling places on the Navajo Nation. So in the agreement, there would be 3 polling places during election day. At Navajo Mountain, at the chapter house, Old Jato, it should have been the Jato chapter house, but the chapter house is dilapidated. So they use the Welcome Center at Monument Valley. And then the third location is at Montezuma Creek. And that's at the, it goes back and forth between the Navajo Utah Commission office and sometimes it's the fire station. But I think the past several elections has been the Navajo Utah Commission office. And then in addition, the third part is to provide for early voting accessibility. So about 30 days before the election day, the county is supposed to be out on the field, providing information about the election activities, the material, and then in many cases when it comes to the general elections, there will be initiatives or referendum on the ballot. And Navajos are asking a lot of questions about what's the content of the ballot. So across the county, at 3 locations again, that there would be early voting centers that would be provided by the county clerk's office. For the November 2020 elections, the county clerk expanded the number of places that would provide early voting centers. That was, in the past, it was just Montezuma Creek Bluff Community Center, and then Monument Valley Welcome Center. But additional places were open during that November 2020 election. So that was good. So that essentially covers the settlement agreement that was extended from the end of December 2020 to now the end of December 2024. As far as the other litigation is concerned, the Navajo Nation through the Navajo Department of Justice has gone through a lengthy litigation regarding redistricting. Just keep in mind that since 1983 or 84, this is the very first time that the county has gone through a series of redistricting. One was for the county commission, and the second one was for the school boards. So that was litigated, and it was completed, I believe, the early part of 2018. And the judge, through a special master, ordered the redistricting plans for the San Juan County Commission, and the second plan was for the San Juan County School Board. So that was used during the 2018, 2019, and 2020 elections. So other than that, the third item that we do have on San Juan County is our engagement with the U.S. Department of Justice. And that is through, I believe, the Community Services Program. We've asked the Navajo Department of Justice to evaluate, U.S. Department of Justice, U.S. Department of Justice to evaluate the chatter that continues to happen in San Juan County, Utah. And that chatter is affiliated with conversations relating to race discrimination. And we were in the middle of having the Denver regional office begin the process of engaging people on the local level in 2019, and then had set out some interviews during the early part of 2020. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, all of that was disrupted, and we're hopeful that the Denver regional office will continue to pursue this matter and get re-engaged in the assessment of the vocabulary that is constantly on our radar in San Juan County, Utah. Some of these relate through the social media. People post their opinions on social media relating to what they perceive to be Navajo people, Native Americans in the San Juan County, Utah. And often these posts are made by, or derogatory and disparaging comments are posted by non-Native Americans in the county. So that's our third area of assessment of San Juan County, Utah. Hopefully that covers what this item is for, Mr. Vice Chair.
Appreciate that update presentation, Mr. Gorman. Committee members, do you have questions related to the presentation? And actually, before we go to that, whoever is calling in from a 505 ending in 030, can you please mute your phone, or staff can you mute their phone? Colleagues, any questions at this time? Oh, it looks like we have Delegate Paul Begay for the record. Okay, not hearing any, I'll ask one quick question. Mr. Gorman, is there anything that the committee could do to be helpful in getting the Denver office moving again?
Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee, I think part of it is just simply re-engaging, for example, on our part with regards to U.S. Department of Justice. And I know that many of the offices in the U.S. government continue to operate and their staff operating from home. That is a critical part of moving, in our case, through the Community Services Program in the U.S. DOJ to begin that process again. And it's just a very difficult situation in which the U.S. Department of Justice is trying to move forward again. We lost, I think, a lot of initiative through that process due to the pandemic. It's beyond our control. But in addition, I think through this effort that you're undertaking regarding the school issues, I think it's important that the Navajo Nation continues to assert its concerns and ways to address these issues. And we realize that there's plenty of matters to address in regards to the areas of racism across the various parts of the counties and the communities in Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. And in this particular situation, I think in the county with the 2020 census, it's becoming more and more prevalent that Navajo, Native Americans, non-Hispanic white are becoming minority, and the non-Hispanic Native Americans have become the majority. And I think that's really part of the nexus of why there is a significant level of racism or disparate treatment perpetrated by non-Native Americans. And that's always going to be the case until such time, I think, that maybe 10, 20, 30 years from now, that people are comfortable with the relationships between different races in the county. And I think there's been tremendous amount of disparate treatment of Native Americans in the county for so long that I think that's a part of trying to move away from that level of interaction that has not been a part of probably to cure these kinds of concerns. So I think through this effort, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee, I think what's important is to express the concerns and moving forward and how to address those issues. Vice Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gorman. And then one follow-up, we're entering an election season, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on what you think the threats may be to voter participation and exercising voting rights this year. And are there other threats or concerns that you foresee?
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, and folks on the line, I think there's a tremendous amount of undertaking across the country. And as far as the voting rights issues are concerned, I always believe that at a point which we achieve, I guess, effective use and efficient use of these policies, the laws start to change, the policies start to change. And that's an indicator that the majority society, non-Native Americans, non-Hispanics, non-quote unquote minorities in the United States, begin the process of making those changes to facilitate ways to make it more difficult for minority voters to participate in the election activities, voting activities. And it's very prominent across the country that that's what's going on today. In Arizona, for sure, that there are many bills being introduced to facilitate ways that non-white voters would be having a difficult time to cast a ballot. As an example, the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision in which Native American, the decision that was made in regards to ballot harvesting. The Supreme Court does recognize that particularly Navajo voters will be impaired in regards to casting their ballots, but that's a very small number that can be sacrificed, I suppose, is the end result of voters. But the majority concern is more important than the minorities' disparate treatment in these voting activities. So that's a very serious concern. So there's been efforts undertaken on the Arizona side to look at entertaining an initiative to try and correct those areas of concerns in which there's going to be a significant negative impact on Native American voters. Just recently, there was a bill introduced on the Utah side for those that are going up to Salt Lake City to lobby. A House bill, I think it's 317, if I recall correctly. It was being held for a while, about a week or so, but now it's been released to and assigned to committees. This is an issue in which there's strong concerns about why there is intention to make it more difficult for Navajo voters in the state of Utah and also in the San Juan County. It's a very important facet of how this bill has a narrow effect in San Juan County. It's really impacting Navajo voters and how that is intended to limit Navajo voter participation, particularly in San Juan County, the way we see it. As an example, that there would be factors in which mail-in balloting would be affected, and also early voting activities would be impacted. Yes, the pandemic has had a very interesting impact on Navajo voters across all the three states. It forced us to participate more in early voting activities, mail-in ballot activities, but whether we are going to grow away from our normal voting activities, which is to go to polling places, nobody knows at the moment whether that's going to be the significant impact that's going to go forward. So I know for these kinds of concerns that we see that they have a direct impact on Navajo voters and how those majority societies wish to treat Navajo voters, minority voters in local places such as San Juan County. Mr. Vice Chair. House Bill 371, I'm informed.
Thank you, Mr. Gorman. Committee members, any further discussion or questions on the first item? Hearing none, we'll move on. Oh, Delegate Haloni, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee members, and everybody on the line. I guess the main thing that, you know, the voter suppression all across the country, you're right, it's been happening and it's still happening. I don't know how we can combat that right now. But what I'm interested in finding out, is there any plans that you have that you might have in mind that what we could do to help our people out there be able to get in to vote? Is there any other plans that are in place right now that we might be able to support? That's what I'm kind of interested in finding out. Chair?
Mr. Gorman, you're recognized.
Okay. Vice Chair, members of the committee, Delegate Helona, I think there's plenty of things that need to be done. For example, as I mentioned on the Arizona side, there's an initiative being introduced. There's several initiatives that are being introduced for the upcoming general election. And there's a lot of competition for that. I think there's one initiative that makes the effort to correct some of the problems that are being created at the moment for example, for Navajo voters. I think there has to be very strong activity towards passing that initiative. And I know that one of our commissioners, Stephen Begay, is a part of that development and making every effort to foster the need to ensure that not only that it has sufficient signatures, but it begins the process of being a part of the public dialogue out there in the state of Arizona. The second part is, I think, in Congress. There are several bills that still are there. I think principally the John Lewis bill is a very, very important bill. I think it goes back to the need to look at ways that the states are fostering some level of racially charged policies in the voting rights issues. And that particular provision in Section 5, the pre-clearance, I think it was a very, very important part of voter suppression issues, race discrimination issues as it pertains to voting. Now, while I know that there are conditions in which Navajo Nation needs to meet in regards to Arizona to ensure that Arizona becomes a covered jurisdiction again, we need to be very meticulous, and it does take time to look at the studies in regards to how racism is a part of the policy making. And I know that at the moment, as we are working with, for example, with Sachs Tierney, it's very difficult to currently determine the level of racism that's a part of these decision making until that time of putting some of the elections behind us, that with those assessments and those studies, such as the impacts of the Section 2 analysis of how racism is a part of the activities in the voting activities, I think that becomes a very important part. So in light of these kinds of studies that need to be a part of the assessment of voting, I think that's also an area in which the Navajo Nation needs to really concentrate on. And those are very expensive aspects of undertaking. For an example, we are in a part of the litigation in San Juan County, New Mexico. It's good that law firms such as DLA Piper ACLU, New Mexico, and then Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights under Law initiated and engaged our office and through the Navajo Department of Justice to bring a lawsuit against San Juan County, New Mexico. And UCLA, University of California at Los Angeles, has elected to be the expert in addressing the various tests that need to be undertaken. We have to ensure that we demonstrate through these expert analysis that there is racism going on. And I know many of our people will just easily say, yes, there is racism. What's the point? We are subject to racism when we go to various communities off the Navajo Nation. While that may be the case, but it's also very important to demonstrate through expert reporting, expert analysis, that those conditions do exist. So that's a very important facet, and those are a very expensive undertaking. Could easily cost the Navajo Nation $300,000, $500,000 for any litigation involving voting rights. I know that there's been conversation too on the Arizona side to address LD2, the congressional district, as to why it became a more non-minority district where minorities cannot elect candidates of their choice. But unfortunately, the Supreme Court also provides for the opportunity for, through redistricting, there would be some level of political gerrymandering that is a part of redistricting. So those are some of the conditions that we face as Indigenous peoples, Indigenous voters, against the various policymaking regimes that really do not want Navajo voters to have that strength anymore. And then the final point, I think, is that it's very difficult, and I think it's going to be a serious challenge for the Navajo Nation come 2031 redistricting. Many of our relatives are moving off the Navajo Nation. And while I think there may be an opportunity to create better ways to have Native Americans or relatives elected, let's say, in the city councils in Phoenix or city council in Flagstaff, or even Gallup is a good example. Gallup, the majority of the community members are Native Americans. It's about 51% Native American. But the problem with these conditions is that it's very difficult to redistrict because our relatives do not live in an area where you can carve out easily a majority Native American district. It's a challenge. And then the second part is that our people do not participate heavily in these local community elections. Gallup is a very good example. Although we have majority Native Americans living in the city of Gallup, a significant proportion of those Native Americans do not vote in the city of Gallup elections. They simply live there. They do not register to vote in those communities. So that also becomes a troublesome situation. Even though our people are moving off the Navajo Nation, most of them come back to vote on the Navajo Nation, but that's not a part of the census activities. Where you vote is not a part of the census data. It's where you live that's as a part of the census data. Thank you.
Committee members?
Hello? Honorable Slater, I'm on the call now.
Ish and I, Chair. So do you want me to continue conducting the meeting, or would you like to take over now? Or would you like to ask some questions?
I'll just make a statement that we appreciate Brother Leonard Gorman's comprehensive review, and we look forward to seeing how we can proceed with the San Juan County, both San Juan counties in New Mexico and as well as Utah. Thank you. Continue presiding.
Chair, so we not covered the San Juan County, New Mexico litigation, and is that something you'd like the committee to discuss or hear about?
Mr. Gorman covered who the lawyers are going to be. Copy? Yes. Proceed like you would as chair.
Okay. Thank you, Shania. With that said, Mr. Gorman, could you? I thought when I read whatever the legal document was that was filed that said Navajo Nation on it. I don't know what you call those things, but I thought it said that the Human Rights Commission was designated, and you were the ones who filed that. So for San Juan County, New Mexico, could you give the committee a brief update on what you've submitted and where things are at?
Let's see if I can pull it up. On the San Juan County, New Mexico side, we have been involved in the redistricting activities, as you know, across the state of New Mexico, Arizona, and also Utah. Just as a brief highlight, to give you kind of the context of what's going on in these redistricting activities. It's important for us to foster, as you passed that resolution back in, I think it was in June of 2021, and you listed out some conditions that we have to address as an entity. So part of those scenarios is to ensure that Native American voting strength is appropriately addressed. And some of those conditions vary based on the number of districts within a given area, like, for example, on the Navajo Nation. So we have to enlist the aspects of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And that gives us the conditions and the parameters that we need to foster through the process of redistricting. So part of that situation is to ensure that given a district, that Navajo voters in that district can be able to elect a candidate of their choice. Now, when we say a candidate of their choice, it doesn't always mean that Navajo people will elect a Navajo person to represent them. It doesn't always mean that. It can mean that Navajos prefer to elect a non-Native American because they believe that that person would represent them as best as they can. So as an example, in the House and Senate side in New Mexico, Patty Lundstrom, the House representative, is Navajo people's candidate of choice. And then you also have Senator Munoz on the south side of Gallup. He's also been determined to be Navajo people's candidate of choice. because we believe as voters in New Mexico that they would represent us in the best interest of the Navajo people. Whether that happens in the activities over in Santa Fe, I mean, that's our judgment. So we utilize a formula that has been set out several decades ago. Particularly in 2001, it was solidified. And that is, what is the percentage of adult Native Americans in a given district that would represent these Native American voters electing the candidate of their choice? So that goes back to the Section 2 issues of the Voting Rights Act. And that is, we have to assess the conditions on the Navajo Nation. What does it take for a Navajo voter to get to a polling place and cast their ballot? Particularly when the election, both the Navajo Nation, state, county, federal elections are on the same day. Take as an example, November 3rd, 2020, when all of the elections took place on the same day. So our formula is that you take 100 voting age population, 100 Navajos that are 18 on above. It doesn't matter if they're registered or not, just so long as they're 18 on above. Then we take 20 off the top automatically. That 20 voting age population, they just simply don't participate in any voting activities. They're not registered. They don't care to register. So that leaves 80 voting age population. So we take 20 more out of that 80, leaving 60. That 20 is a confused voter. They believe, sometimes they believe that casting a ballot only for the Navajo election is sufficient enough. They've also cast a ballot for state, county, federal elections, mainly because the polling places are often at two different locations. It could be at a different building, could be an entirely different place. So that causes these voters to get confused. So we're left with 60 adult age. Then we take 20 off that remaining 60 again. That 20, the third set of 20 are registered voters for both Navajo and state, county, federal elections. But on election day, they have a very difficult time getting to the polling places. Weather is not good. They don't have transportation. They don't have gas money, and things of that nature. As we all know, across the Navajo Nation, dirt roads are sometimes very difficult to travel on. And I know I travel in the area on the southeast side of San Juan County, New Mexico. That's a very, very difficult place to travel because of the road. There's a lot of rocks on the road, and some people will say, don't go through that road, please. You're gonna get lost. One, second, the roads are very tough to travel on. So those are some of the impeding factors on the Navajo Nation. So we have to assess what's on the Navajo Nation. So we've made the determination that of the 100 voting age population on the Navajo Nation, only 40 of them are dependable voters. They will go out and cast ballots for both the state, federal, county elections and the Navajo Nation election on the same day. So we can really depend on, at the most, 40 voting age population on the Navajo Nation. So the rest of the 60, they fall off throughout the process. So that's a very serious concern. So we take that into consideration and compute that into what is the percentage of Native Americans within a given district that can elect candidates of their choices. We settle on 62, 63% back in 2001 when we were redistricting, for sure. And in the courts on the New Mexico side, they recognized that. As a matter of fact, when we were litigating in the Utah side, the defendants were saying, no, it's 65%. Well, that's great. I mean, the higher it is, the better. So that's where we calculate that at least at the minimum 62% Native American voting age population in a given district, with Navajo voters can elect candidates of their choice. On the top side, some people will say 80% Native American voting age population is great because you almost guarantee that you can elect a Native American out of that district. That's true. However, that's also considered as packing Native Americans in one district. So as we started to work with San Juan County, New Mexico, we saw that the maps that they produced were always packing Native Americans in District 1. They have 5 districts. So District 1 goes along on a state line, sometimes all the way from the county line, from Nash Chitty all the way into the Four Corners area, into Shiprock. So they had several plans that they shared with the public. And we submitted our map back in the middle of November. And what we have done is to look at unpacking their plans to ensure that Native American voting age population are shared between 2 districts, and that was District 1 and District 2. District 2 is on the south side of the county, and then District 1 is continued to be on the north west quadrant of the county. So that's where we believe that as we redistrict the county, we see that our plan is intended to unpack their District 1 so that we can have a second district in which Native Americans can elect candidates of their choice. So let me share with you on the screen the numbers that are part of the lawsuit that was filed a couple of weeks ago against San Juan County. So you see on the screen, figure 3, this is a plan that the Navajo Nation Human Rights Commission submitted to the county for adoption. So District 1, as you can see on top of in the spreadsheet, on the far right side column, this is American Indian share of VAP. That's the non-Hispanic Native Americans. It's at 63.3% in District 1, and then District 2 is at 63.2. And as I mentioned that the 62% cutoff, we're about 1% above that cutoff at 63%. This is an indication to us that there is a strong probability that Native American voters in Districts 1 and 2 will elect candidates of their choice. And then also look at District 5. That district has become more and more of an influence district. What that means is that Native Americans living and voting in District 5 have a stronger potential of impacting the results of District 5 elections. In the past, that was not always the case. So here's what we submitted the map 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 districts. So you see that District 1 is extending further on into La Plata area, north of the Farmington, and then extends further westward to the Four Corners. And then that straight line on the south side of District 1 is a power line that goes across. And then District 2 is a significant majority of the southern part of San Juan County, New Mexico. This is what we submitted. And a matter of fact, their expert that they hired gave the opinion, I think it was on December 7th, when they're reviewing the maps, that Navajo Nation's map is very good. It unpacks District 1 and shares the Native American voting age population between 2 districts. There's a strong viability that there will be candidates elected from Districts 1 and 2 that are preferred choices by Native American voters. But you'll see how their plan looks. District 1 further extends southward, and it picks up a significant Native American population. And District 2 is reduced to, I believe it was 52%, and you see their numbers there as to what they adopted. District 1 is entirely packed, 83.31% Native American voting age population. District 2 is reduced to 52.29%. You know, you may think that, well, Native Americans are the majority in District 2. It's true for Hispanic voters that they do not face the conditions that Native Americans face on indigenous lands. 51% for Hispanic voters is the preferred number. 51% on up is what they look at, but not us as Native Americans. 52%, although it's the majority, but that does not give us the benefit of saying that Native American voters in District 2 will elect a candidate of their choice. It won't happen because of the conditions that we face on Navajo land. And that's the crux of the litigation in San Juan County, New Mexico. So you'll see side by side the plans that have been adopted by the commission, and then the plan that was submitted to the San Juan County Commission. And they do our experts did some density assessment and where Native Americans live and where non-Native Americans live and how they are spread across in the various parts of the plan. So that's the nexus of our litigation, and also the Navajo Nation is a party to this litigation, and it was filed in a couple of weeks ago. I think it was the beginning part of February. And then you have the list of the party members, Navajo Nation overall, and then our commission, and then individual Navajo voters. Lorenzo Bates, he's the former Speaker of the Council. Ms. Kay Babigay, she's the employee at one of the schools in Shiprock area. Gloria Ann Dennison, she's a former employee at the Navajo Election Administration. Tracy D. Raymond, he lives in Kirtland area, and he's a chair of the farm board in the Shiprock area. And then Bessie Yazi Warito, she's an elder. She's talented with understanding the English language. So we're helping her go through the process of providing interpretation services. She lives on the southeast corner of San Juan County. So she's very dependent on the land and the livestock that she has. So that is essentially the lawsuit against San Juan County, New Mexico. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gorman. Committee members, do you have any questions or comments based off the presentation thus far? Okay. Hearing none, thank you very much, Mr. Gorman. We're going to move on to 4B. And that is San Juan County Schools regarding safety of Navajo students utilizing face covering / masks in the public education system. Concern reported by San Juan County, Utah, Commissioner Kenneth Maryboy, Navajo Nation Human Rights Commission presenter, Mr. Gorman, Navajo Department of Justice presenter, Attorney General McPaul, and Mr. Spruan. So do we have Commissioner Maryboy on the line? Okay, well, not hearing him, then I'd like to defer to the presenters, which would be DOJ and the Human Rights Commission, on who would like to go first. We have, excuse me, we have the Human Rights Commission first, but I just want to confirm with the presenters that that is the order in which they would desire to go.
Mr. Vice Chair, this is Paul Spruan. I was added to this agenda yesterday. I don't have any specific information related to this matter other than the statement on the agenda. So I don't have any personal knowledge that would allow me to report other than this is an issue that seems to be coming up with several school districts, including the two in New Mexico. Recently because of the governor. But other than that, I don't have any personal knowledge as to this particular matter to provide. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Spruan. Mr. Gorman, do you have a presentation on this matter?
Where is it at? I think it's this one. I'll share with you the plan that's instituted by the school district. The school district covers the entire county except a little place called Spanish Valley on the north side. It's about close to 600 people that live in the Spanish Valley, San Juan County side. Several decades back, they were annexed out for the purpose of the school district plan. They are voting members for the school district in Grand County, which is the county just north of San Juan County, Moab area. So they live south of Moab. Along the county line. So as those that are driving through Moab today, you'll see a little sign that says San Juan County or Grand County. In that little valley area south of Moab, there's a concentrated number of residents. Their belief is that they are already a part of the Grand County school district system. Their kids go to that school system. So they were annexed out some time ago. So we don't include them in the redistricting activities. There's about 600 people that live in that area. Now, I know that Mr. Maryboy, Commissioner Maryboy, has raised this point with us in the past, a couple of weeks ago, as he went before your committee, Vice Chair. And the situation is that that there are a number of schools, both primary and secondary schools on the Navajo Nation, where Navajo kids can attend school on the Navajo Nation, both primary and high school. So as an example, in Navajo Mountain area, there's both the kindergarten all the way to 12th grade school system there. So they don't leave the Navajo Nation. And then at Monument Valley, it's the same way as Navajo Mountain, from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade. Navajo students don't leave the Navajo Nation. But as we get to Montezuma Creek, and then you have Red Mesa, Mexican Water, Aneth, Tisnaspas, Tenahoto areas in the Utah side, substantial number of Navajo kids are bused on a daily basis from their residence to the school that they attend. As an example, in the Mexican Water area, the bus start running as early as 4 o'clock in the morning. Navajo kids get on the bus at 5 o'clock in the morning. And as I understand, some of them are on the bus for a good 2 to 3 hours before they get to the school. There is a high school near Montezuma Creek, and that's a high school. is close to the Navajo Nation. So predominantly many of the Navajo kids go there. Even some of the kids from the Red Mesa area go to that school. But predominantly many of the Red Mesa students and also Mexican Water students are bused all the way up to Blanding. Blanding is the high school that's located and that serves Navajo students. There was an undertaking a couple of years ago to establish a high school in the Mexican Water chapter area, but that fell apart. I remember there were initiatives to construct high school or secondary school west of Bluff, Utah, but that was abandoned, and now the school was constructed where they used to have the Northern Navajo Fairgrounds. That's where the new school is located. But many of our Navajo students are bused to Blanding. That's where the issue, as we understand it, originates on this matter. So many of our Navajo kids are traveling on a day-to-day basis off the Navajo Nation, just as it happens in many places too, across the state of Arizona and New Mexico, are bused to locations off the Navajo Nation, where they have different laws, different policies as it pertains to wearing masks. So what I'm sharing with you is the 2021-2022 San Juan County School District School Plan. And this pertains to creating zones in the school district. And there's 2 zones that they have created for the San Juan County School District. One is the mountain region, and the second one is the river region. Okay, so the mountain region, as it states in this policy, is the schools that serve LaSalle, Monticello, Blanding area. That's considered as the mountain region. And students in that area will not have a face covering mandate. And it further says, in fact, current state law removes the option for any school district to enforce a mandatory face covering mandate in schools. Still, face coverings are optional, and San Juan County School District encourages all parents and staff to make their decision regarding face coverings based on his or her level of comfortableness with current pandemic data. School administration and staff will be proactive in fostering a climate supportive of either one wearing a face covering or not wearing a face covering. And some of the aspects in this policy for the mountain region, as an example, in the second bullet point in the middle there, it says there will be no official contact tracing done. So for all those Navajo kids that come from the Mexican Water, Red Mesa area and are bused to Blanding, and if they contract COVID, there will be no opportunity to begin the process of tracing who was carrying the COVID-19. And then you also river region, and this is where it says, complying with Navajo Nation current school reopening guidelines, all schools in the Montezuma Creek, Bluff, Monument Valley, and Navajo Mountain area, river region, will begin the school year with a face covering mandate. Some examples of exemptions from the mandate would be eating lunch, adequately spaced play on the playground, and athletic participation. All students and staff members will be required to wear a mask covering. If needed, mask coverings will be provided by your child's school. So there's 2 different regions. One, the river region, is respecting the mandatory face covering pursuant to, as we understand, the Navajo policy regarding the pandemic. But the mountain region is respecting the state law, which does not mandate the face covering. So the issue here is that Navajo students being transported from the Navajo Nation and going to schools off the Navajo Nation where they are affected by the COVID-19 issues. So that's what we understand. Now, whether Commissioner Maryboy will entertain any local ordinance in the county through the commission, he hasn't stated anything to us along that line. Whether the county commission has the authority to impose across the county, for example, in the school systems, that all students wear masks. I don't know if that's something that he will entertain. So this is the extent that we are aware of in regards to the plans that are instituted by the school district. And they do have information on their website regarding the number of cases that they have. And I think the current school year, and you can find that on their website. Let's see if I could share that with you. Do you see those numbers on the San Juan County School District COVID-19 information 2021 to 2022? And I'm not sure what these some of these initials stand for. Montezuma Creek, maybe 3, Monument Valley High School 2, and then TES 3. I'm not sure what those really stand for. So that's something that's available on their website, on the San Juan County School District. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gorman. Committee members, I'd like to open it up to questions or comments related to the presentation's content.
Taylor, Delegate Daniel Poe.
Chair So, you're recognized.
Hello, ja, gedeschneide colleagues at the Health Education Human Services Committee. Basically, what if we have a state lifting of the mask mandate as well as the county lifting? Mr. Gorman, Priscilla, what do you think about the approach that the school district
No, I'm okay.
basically allow the parents and the students to wear masks on a voluntary basis? I know the main concern, I think, Commissioner Maryboy brought up was for some of the students that got exposed, that became positive, they came home and basically spread it within the household or the extended family. And that was the primary reason that he wanted committee's intervention. And I guess to the Department of Justice and to Human Rights Commission, what would be the thought about approaching the San Juan County School Board to basically offer that amendment to their lifting of the mask mandate. That would be one of the thoughts, because we don't want, some of the students, I'm sure, would be wanting to wear the mask, and we don't want them to be sent to the principal's office or to be sent home, because I know that, especially where we have grandmas and relatives that are at the house that are immune compromised. High levels of diabetes, high blood pressure, COPD, those parts. They themselves, the students, the young kids, they don't want to bring it back. And so those are some things that I think is of primary importance. That would be my thoughts, presiding chair.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And is that directed at Mr. Gorman and Mr. Spruan, or just one? I didn't quite catch. Well, I'll recognize Mr. Gorman first and then go to Mr. Spruan.
Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee, and Mr. Chair. The policy that I shared with you earlier on in the mountain region, remember, there's the river region and the mountain region. And the river region is supposedly intended to respect the Navajo Nation's policy on wearing masks on the Navajo Nation. Now, the mountain region is off the Navajo Nation activities. In that particular paragraph, the first bullet point, at the end of that paragraph, it reads, school administration and staff will be proactive in fostering a climate supportive of either one wearing a face covering or not wearing a face covering. So the school staff are directed to be proactive in this area. Now, we have been a party to an analysis that was done, I want to guess about maybe 8 years ago or so, on the San Juan County School District at Blanding. And the concern then was that the school district is exercising an activity that targets Navajo students. And that activity was to call upon police when a Navajo student, I suppose, is difficult to work with in the school, and they would call police. That we found it to be inappropriate because as a child is growing up, that child should not be subjected to some level of assertive, aggressive law enforcement activity. And it should be handled in a way that's done without engaging law enforcement, because there's been national studies that indicate that if you treat a student at an earlier age with interfacing him or her with law enforcement, it's almost a guarantee that that child will eventually end up in prison because of the way the school has, I guess, imprinted in the child the interaction with law enforcement personnel. So we raised that point with the school district through our interaction with the Salt Lake City ACLU. I don't recall exactly what the result was, but we do find that that has been the case in which the school district personnel were treating Navajo students in a way that was not necessary. So I think that I'm not suggesting that that's what's going on here as a result of wearing masks or not wearing masks, but the pattern practiced by the school system is much more leaning towards those kinds of activities than not. So I think that's a very important aspect as to how Navajo children are being fostered to ensure that one, there's no peer pressure placed on them, and then there's no disparate treatment of Navajo children in those school environment. So those would be the first two concerns that we would have along race lines, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gorman. Mr. Spruan, do you have anything to add at this time?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair, just someone is not on mute.
Can the number ending in 169 staff, can you mute that number?
I don't know. You need to find out. Well, how many keys should they have?
Or whoever is on another call, and
Oh my.
whoever just said, "Oh my goodness, can you please mute your line or get off?" Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just generally want to say this is an issue that is coming to a head both in Utah and in New Mexico. I have not heard it being as much of an issue on the Arizona side, on the on-reservation schools. At least my observation with my own children in the Window Rock Unified School District is they still are enforcing absolute mask mandates, temperature checks, et cetera, despite being a quasi-state institution. But in terms of sort of the legal options one has in these situations, I think it had been suggested, I was not at the last meeting, but seeing the reports, Delegate Charlene had suggested communicating directly with the school boards. And I will say that that is an important aspect beyond sort of the ideas of litigation, which has its, sort of back and forth on this issue. As members of the committee and Dodie or others are aware, we are still in litigation with the Window Rock Unified School District before the Labor Commission on remand on a basic issue as to what legal authority the Navajo Nation has, even on reservation, when it comes to these state schools. And so one of the things that we encourage is elected leadership speaking to the elected leadership of the school boards. As Mr. Gorman had indicated, there had been past litigation. One of the issues in San Juan County, Utah, was the school board allocation, school board districting. And a lot of work has been done with a number of organizations to the Human Rights Commission and elsewhere to get Navajos on those boards. And so one of the things that we would suggest on these types of situations is the committee reach out to the board and have the board appear before this committee to discuss with them these types of issues as to what exactly is happening, what their policies are, what they will be, and seeing what they can do through their elected boards to make sure that the concerns of the Navajo Nation are implemented. And to Chairman So's discussion about there isn't a mandate, but will Navajos be discriminated if they continue to wear masks? That's one aspect of it. Another aspect of it, which has just come up over the last week on the New Mexico side, is Governor Lujan Grisham's release of any indoor mask mandates. And there's already been suggestions that Central Consolidated School District and the Gallup-McKinley School District, even for on-reservation schools, much less the border town schools, as we have been discussing with Blanding and elsewhere, where Navajos are bused from the nation to those schools and back. But even schools that are located on tribal trust land that operate pursuant to leases for the Navajo Nation, whether those schools will follow state or tribal law. And so there's a lot of moving parts with this. It's sort of in flux, as I believe we have some employees from Doty, and I see Dr. Jim is also available, or at least on the line, to discuss exactly what's happening across all three states. But it's definitely issues that need to have a direct reaction in a contemporary way, because it's going to become more complicated very quickly with all of these schools. So generally speaking, at least from DOJ's perspective, there are, of course, ways that we can think about potential litigation. But in this situation, particularly for border town schools or off-reservation schools, we believe some direct discussion with the school boards to see what their policies are and what they can be, and emphasizing the importance of following the concerns of the Navajo people, I think will have a more immediate direct impact on this particular issue. And so that would be my suggestion, is that these boards of these schools, these elected leaders, come before this committee, or a meeting is set up to discuss with them officially or formally or otherwise the concerns of the nation, because they're the ones who have the direct ability to implement the policies that we're talking about, and what we would like to see in terms of at least respecting the fact that Navajo children may still be wearing masks, even in those schools off reservation where there is no mandate, or that those schools that are located on the reservation continue to respect the public health orders issued by the Department of Health. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Spruan. Committee members, the floor is open.
Presiding Chair,
Yes, Delegate So.
Hello to the committee and to Mr. Gorman and to Mr. Spruhan. I guess, you know, because of the rapid spread and all the publicity about Navajos don't have running water, I think a lot of the folks in the border towns, the perception has been they are unkempt and they're the cause spread into the border towns. And that's the part that's, you know, really come to light. And so, in effect, some aspects, you know, being shunned. Those are the realities that are occurring in the border towns. That's the part that I guess makes up part of the total picture. Even the ones that have running water and domestic water, they're still shunned just because they're Navajo. So those are some things that I guess continues. The main aspect is this pandemic, this virus, and the exposure with the taking off of the mask, and the aspect that the Omicron has and is undergoing changes. As Dr. Fauci says, the virus is wily on national TV, and and I'm just really concerned. Thing is not going to go away with warm weather, as many think it will. And that's the part that's very concerning, and especially for the, again, the ones where they're immune compromised. The other thought is, could CHR, doctor, the healthcare services provide a statement for the student to file with the school so that they will continue to wear the mask and not, that aspect of hoping that they won't bring it home. What are Dr. Jill Jim's thoughts, and even to presenters, Mr. Spruhan and to Mr. Gorman? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Committee members, do you have more comments or questions at this time before we go back to our presenters?
Chair Fauna.
Delegate Haloni, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. And committee members and all those on the line. Question I had is, they're talking about a new variant. I guess it's called 8B2, the spinoff from Omicron virus, and that I understand that's starting to spread across the globe, and that I guess the only thing that we really need to concern ourselves with right now is make sure that we, the Navajo Nation, continue to advocate to wear your mask, continue to do your hand cleaning, to be protecting yourselves, especially if you go out to the border towns and all around where you're at, and keep those safety practices. No matter what happens with this virus, it's not going to go away. I think we're just going to have to learn how to live with it. And like they've been saying across in the European country, that's what they're moving towards, is to take all the mandates away and move forward with living with the virus and making sure that they have pin it down whenever they can, whenever it breaks out, an outbreak comes around their way. But us here, as far as the Navajo Nation is concerned, I think that's the best thing. The best defense right now is to continue to advocate to everybody to continue their safety practices. I was out around traveling around the Phoenix area and Flagstaff, and you run into all different kinds of people out there that don't wear masks. And then you see them wearing masks, and then you're thinking to yourself, well, that person must be a Republican, because it's mostly the Republicans that are against mask mandates, and then the Democrats are not. And so it's hard for us to decipher that because we have to argue both sides of the aisle. We don't have a Democratic society. We don't have a Republican society here on the reservation. So we have to finesse both sides. And there's those kind of things that we have to do. You have to forget about that Republican, Democrat, and think about the people and how you're working for them to keep them safe. And so I think that's the best defense that we can have right now is to continue that we mandate our people follow the safety guidelines. I think that's the best choice right now as far as the new virus that's coming out. This new virus comes out and it's going to be more deadly. We'll be a step ahead of it if we continue to practice our safety habits. So that's just a comment I think that needs to be said right there. Thank you, Chair. I just want to bring that up.
Thank you very much, Delegate Helena. Committee members, any further comments or questions? Okay, well, I'll return to Mr. Gorman and Mr. Spruan to make any closing remarks that they'd like to in response to the comments that have been made. Mr. Gorman?
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, and people in the audience. Part of what is important for us is to ensure that we express our thoughts. And there are many ways that can be done. And I think for a long time, Navajo people have always been perceived as people that don't speak up for themselves. They're not educated, I suppose, in the Western environment, and they won't raise a concern. And that's, I think, important to place it in the context that we're talking about here. And it's important that Navajo Nation makes it known as to what its concerns are. Because if we don't say anything, if we don't do anything, it gets to be perceived as they must like what we're doing. And that's an important facet of the work that we do to ensure that people that we interact with understand the concerns that we have. So as an example, I think it was back in the early part of 2020 when it became very prominent in the social media where an exchange occurred in Gallup Home Depot. And the concern was that this COVID-19 at that time was a Navajo disease. And we went through, in our office, through a series of meetings with the Home Depot, the various regional offices, and they did their own investigation. And at the end, it was very unfortunate that whomever gathered the one-on-one information and posted on the social media was unable to come forward and own up to the information that they were circulating. And it just simply went away because this person just didn't want to come forward and explain what he or she experienced at that Home Depot. And that became a very serious factor. However, we were able to interact with the business itself and made some changes. So if you get a chance to go to Home Depot in Gallup, now there's two different things that are in place. One is that they now have a Navajo store manager, a Navajo person that's actually managing the Gallup store. The second is that they are implementing an internal policy, and that is they have developed a patch for their employees. So as an example, some employees will wear those patches saying in the Spanish words that if you want to speak to me in Spanish, I'm available. And also, although many of us have a challenge to reading the Navajo language, they're supposed to have employees wearing those patches that also say, I speak the Navajo language, speak to me in the Navajo language. So those are some aspects of, I think, the positive change that came about. And it was all through the effort of interacting with those people in the ranks that make these decisions for the change that need to take place. So I think that's a very important part of this situation. So what I'm saying is that let's not have this matter just whittle away and slide through our fingers. I think it's very, very important to meet with the school board and discuss this issue. There is plenty of money that is floating around in the name of Navajo students. And unfortunately, many of the non-Native Americans are benefiting from these sources on and off the Navajo Nation. And I think that's a very important facet of ensuring that we as a Navajo government say something about this and see some changes as a result of this concern that is on the table for us. It's not always a lawsuit that does make those changes, but unfortunately, in San Juan County, Utah, that essentially has been the mobility of bringing some change in the county. Navajos have sued to get schools constructed on the Navajo Nation. It was not done without any lawsuit. Those schools on the Navajo Nation have been constructed primarily due to the lawsuits. So it's important, I think, going along the line of what the recommendation is from the Navajo Department of Justice, meet with the school district board members and go from there. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gorman. Mr. Spruan, anything to add?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. No, I agree with everything Mr. Gorman has said, and I definitely appreciate the importance of this matter as brought before this committee, and DOJ stands ready to assist in any way possible with this committee, Mr. Gorman, Dr. Jim, and Dodie, and otherwise in whatever the policymakers decide is appropriate. And so we will monitor this matter and can be available to deploy at any time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Committee members, I think if you recall back to our committee meeting last week, the purpose of this work session was to highlight these issues with individuals who have expertise in addressing, I'd say, some of these concerns and conflicts that arise with the border town communities and the governments that serve our people that live off the nation. And I think we've accomplished that today, but I would like some instruction or direction on how you'd like to move forward. We can formally review this at the next HES meeting and add it to the agenda and issue either a directive or schedule a meeting with the school board or something to that effect. But I think you've heard some strong presentations and have a better appreciation for what's taking place in San Juan County, Utah at this time. So I'd like to open it up to a discussion on how you'd like to proceed forward. So we have a little bit of resolution, and then tomorrow when we do have our HES committee meeting, we can discuss formally what we would like to do. Colleagues?
Yeah, this is Wanika.
Chair, you're recognized.
Thank you, Honorable Slater. Appreciate this time you've given me to express my concerns. I agree with Mr. Spruhan in reference to meeting with the school board. I think that's the route that we need to go. Because I think when we work with the Human Rights Commission, I think there's hesitancy in the school board. But I think if we meet with them directly, I think that will be more appropriate. And if we don't get anywhere with them, then I think we need to start working with Leonard Gorman and other officers. Because one of the things that we talked about was for as the education sovereignty and for as the health, as far as the Navajo Nation is concerned. We just talk about it. We haven't gotten to that point. I think we need to start pursuing that again. That way we'll have jurisdiction over all the schools on the Navajo Nation. It makes it hard when we don't have jurisdiction when it comes to counties, states, where they have jurisdiction. We can't really directly get involved. And I think the best way to do it is to meet with the school board. See if we can find out for ourselves exactly what the situation is. Based on that, if we need to go any further, then we can get other entities involved. So I would appreciate it if we could just set a time and a date that we might be able to meet with the county school board. Thank you, Chair.
Committee members, is there concurrence with the request and direction that Delegate Wanika offered?
Presiding Chair, Delegate Daniel, so.
Yes, Chair. So.
Thank you, committee members, the folks on the call. I guess I remember seeing a letter or an email back from the president of the school, and I don't recall the exact contents of that call or that email, the letter. Ms. Benali, could you recap what that letter said in response to asking for a meeting?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. So I'm on the call with Mr. Moroni Benali, so I didn't catch all the details of it, all that was stated.
Chair, so do you want to restate your request or Mr. Benali, he was referring to the correspondence on meeting with the San Juan School Board, and he wanted you to review the content of that correspondence.
I'm sorry. The correspondence from the Superintendent Ron Nielsen indicated that they were, from his perspective, that they were respectful of what Navajo Nation was enforcing as far as a mask mandate for students. And that if a school is over 50% Native American Navajo students, that they would comply with the mask mandate for the school. And however, if the school system had less than 50% Native American students or Navajo students, that they would not enforce the mask mandate, but they would not discourage any mask wearing, if the student chooses, particularly a Navajo student. That's what I understand. And also that I did forward all the documents that he had sent. And there was one, I think the Utah schools position in the health field and health concerns about social distancing and keeping track of the positive cases and tracking those at least. And just their priority was the safety of all students that were going to the public schools. And he did indicate that the county commissioners do have the authority, along with the the Utah State Health Office, to impose any health mandates that they choose and that they feel are necessary. That was the information that was from Superintendent Nielsen. Also that he's willing to set up a meeting with 2 school board members and the Health, Education, and Human Services Committee when they choose to meet. He would like to keep it at 2 school board members, because if it's 3, then that'll indicate that it's an official school board meeting and that they have to comply with their Open Meetings Act. And so he would prefer to keep it with 2 school board members and meeting with the Health, Education, Human Services Committee. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Benali. Chair, so does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Benali. I guess the other is if we could designate a day to meet with them. I'd still like to have Mr. Gorman present. Hopefully, Commissioner Marygoy would also attend. Because it is in one way the perception, the sovereignty of the Navajo Nation pervades over our students. They are our children, and as such, we have to do what we can do to ensure their health and their safety, as well as to make sure they are getting their proper education. Thank you. And perhaps tomorrow we can set the proposed meeting day. Presiding Chair, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. So I agree. I think we have consensus between yourself and what Delegate Winika said, that we want to continue with the meeting with the San Juan School Board. We'll do so in a way that we could have an open and frank conversation with them. And I think that that is meeting two at a time and not all together, so we don't trigger that Open Meetings Act where they have to do their agenda and all that other stuff, but instead meet more on our terms as the HES committee. So in terms of establishing that as an action item, I think, that has to be done during a HES committee meeting where we have a quorum. So I'll ask for any dissent right now on moving forward in that manner, or any alternative thoughts on how we should proceed forward. Okay, I'm not hearing any. So committee members, let's amend the agenda to follow up on this report at tomorrow's HES committee meeting. And we can establish some proposed times, or one proposed time to convene with the school board membership. And I think we'll want Mr. Gorman there as well to listen in, participate on that meeting. And we can discuss tomorrow whether we want attorneys. I think it might be better not to, because that triggers a bunch of anxiety, I know, in some of these meetings, but we'll discuss that. Committee members, I'm going to call that this is now item 5, close of work session announcements, adjournment. Unless folks have other things that they need to discuss at this time. Going twice.
Sheriff Warner?
Yes, Delegate Helena.
I just wanted to have make a quick comment on the presenters, to thank them for all the information that they gave us today, and we'll try to think of ways that we can combat this problem that we're having to go through right now, and it's going to be here for a while. But we support your efforts as far as to try to get these districts evened out. And so I just wanted to thank you all for your hard work and working on these projects. So appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Helena. Any other committee members? Okay. Not
Vice
here.
Chair?
Yes, Ms. Madali.
Vice Chair, yes, I see that Darlene Pino is on the call. If she could give me a phone call at the Office of Legislative Services, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Anything else? Okay, hearing nothing at this time. It's 11:05, and as the presiding chair, I will say we are adjourned. Thank you very much to the Human Rights Commission and to the Department of Justice for participating in today's meeting. Thank you to our legislative staff, and thank you to our colleagues for getting on the line today. Those of you who are traveling to Salt Lake, travel safely, and we'll be convening tomorrow to follow up on this item. We're going to
So go in there.